The third chapter in part 2, entitled Transcendence, can be best understood by first considering the philosophical concept of a category. Categories represent fundamental ways of systematically organizing and understanding reality. They're the broadest descriptors that can be applied to a subject. One of the most well-known developments in the study of categories after Aristotle comes from Kant. Kant's approach shifts the focus from a realism, the categories being inherent features of things, to a form of idealism, the categories being mental structures composed of a set of concepts that organize and enable our experience of things. In this chapter, Sartre addresses many of these categories, such as space, time, quality, quantity, etc., in a way that aims to distinguish his perspective from both realism and idealism. Since the categories traditionally provide a framework for understanding and organizing knowledge, or serve as the foundation for attaining knowledge, this chapter ultimately seeks to reach an understanding of knowledge itself, but a knowledge that is based on intuition rather than representation. For Husserl, intuition is described as the direct presence of the thing to consciousness. However, Sartre notes that the in itself cannot be present on its own, and as such, the meaning of intuition must be reversed to mean the presence of consciousness to the thing. So what is consciousness? Consciousness is nothing other than this relation to the thing, but a relation to what consciousness is not. In other words, the for itself, or consciousness, constitutes itself in negating the thing which it is not. As Sartre writes, the for itself is a being, such that in its being is in question, insofar as this being is essentially a certain way of not being, a being which it posits simultaneously as other than itself. Thus, consciousness as the direct presence to a thing entails negation. And we see that there are two kinds of negation addressed in this chapter: external negation and internal negation. External negation is a bond established between two beings without modifying them, while internal negation influences the inner structure of the being that is denied a certain quality. It is a relation between two beings where one is defined by its lack of the other. Such internal negation is inherent to the for itself, which is the only being that defines itself by what it is not or what it lacks. It is also what allows being in itself to be revealed as this rather than that. So let's take an example of a book to make this a little clearer. So when encountering this book, to perceive it as a book, I must first and foremost separate myself from it. I am not this book. If I were identical to it, I wouldn't be able to perceive it as a book. However, through this internal negation, I not only recognize the book's existence, but also determine my own being. I negate my identity with the book by stating that I am not it. At the same time, by observing and engaging with the book, I establish a relationship with it that reveals my possibilities concerning this book. I could read the book, throw it across the room because it's so long and difficult, and so on. At the same time, another negation can be made wherein I determine that this book is not a mug. This external negation concerns what is purely outside of the for itself and the in itself, so that it does not alter my being nor the being of the book. And we'll see many examples of this external negation at work, such as space and quantity. So in talking about categories, knowledge, consciousness, and negation, it might at first seem confusing as to why this chapter is entitled Transcendence. What is transcendence here? Sartre states that it is that inner and realizing negation which reveals the in itself while determining the being of the for itself. As such, transcendence defined here entails internal negation. But this transcendence in revealing the in itself while determining the for itself encounters a state of being that exists beyond the boundaries of consciousness. And we have here then a second sense of transcendence now pertaining to the in itself encountered in the concrete thisness of an object. And a particular emphasis in this chapter is placed on the encounter with these transcendent beings. The emergence of these beings as either this or that thing is what makes possible, then, an external negation that gives rise to what Sartre will call transcendent nothings, sometimes also referred to as ideals. And the categories that we'll be addressing in this video will be seen in their connection with internal and external negations. One of the first categories to emerge through the for itself's transcendence is totality. To grasp this book, it is necessary to separate it from all the other individual things surrounding it. The for itself negates these other things, which become an amorphous background against which the book stands out. As a result, not only is the book revealed to me, but so is the complete context surrounding the book, which the book both distinguishes itself from and relates to. This totality represents a synthesis and an ideal limit. It's a synthesis because it brings together all the various elements that make up the whole, but an ideal limit because this totality exists beyond our perception, a collection of things that is never fully constituted, beheld, or comprehended. Nevertheless, the for itself puts forth this ideal, enabling a world to be conceived. The world serves as the foundation and context through which the for itself relates to the in itself as manifested in concrete ways. Such totality is only possible by the for itself because it is itself a detotalized totality, wherein the for itself is completely itself in not being complete. In other words, I am always in a state of becoming. Space is another category considered here. When attempting to comprehend the totality of things, there is a certain instability that emerges within this world. This instability involves a dynamic relationship between various beings. However, this is not an inherent characteristic of the beings themselves, but rather is a quality brought forth by the for itself. Space is not a being, but a moving relation between beings that are unrelated. It is a transcendent nothing that the for itself attributes to being, thereby giving a place for particular things. Unlike totality, space is not apprehended synthetically, but in fact emerges only when this totality breaks down into a multiplicity of things. This makes space result from an exterior negation that neither alters the for itself nor characterizes the in itself. Quality is another category analyzed here. What is quality? According to Aristotle, quality refers to a stable property or fundamental aspect of an object that cannot be altered without changing the very essence of the object that is possessing that quality. Kant, on the other hand, views quality as a category of understanding that relates to the degrees of intensity of sensation. Propositionally, it's expressed through an affirmation or negation that's found in a judgment. In contrast to all this, Sartre argues that quality is not a subjective determination, but rather the very essence of a being inseparable from the object it describes. The yellow color of a lemon, for instance, is not a subjective perception of the lemon, but rather the lemon itself. Additionally, the lemon is not composed of independent qualities such as yellow and sour that combine to form the lemon. As Sartre states, it is the sourness of the lemon which is yellow. It is the yellow of the lemon which is sour. But yet at the same time, while yellow and sour are inseparable qualities of one and the same lemon, we can speak and do speak about yellowness and sourness abstractly on their own. So what's going on here? According to Sartre, abstraction entails a presence to being as a future possibility of mind. This makes the for itself a kind of abstractor. It's the one who can be present to being with a future that is beyond being. My ability to extract the qualities of the object from its concrete thisness is what then allows me to impose a sense of sameness that permeates each instance that I behold it. It allows me to posit its ongoing permanence into the future that I have yet to be present to as well. And rather than some optional feature of one's relating to an object, Sartre claims that there is no separation between the concrete and the abstract in my engagement with being. Both are necessary to perceive a particular thing. This concrete book cannot be understood if I did not at the same time apprehend its qualities abstractly in terms of my own future possibilities concerning the book's permanent qualities. I would not be able to even recognize this book as a book were I not capable of first and foremost apprehending those qualities abstractly. Sartre writes, "The abstract is a structure of the world and is necessary for the upsurge of the concrete. The concrete is concrete only insofar as it leans in the direction of its abstraction, that it makes itself known by the abstraction which it is. Quantity, in contrast to quality, is an external relation that does not belong to the things counted, so sort of similar to space. When we count 2 books, the number 1 or the number 2 do not have an essential connection with these books, nor to the one who's counting them. It simply differentiates and separates within a larger whole. Counting here in this particular circumstance also renders each individual book insignificant. I'm not concerned here with the specific identity of this or that book, only its reducibility to a number that does not define the book and can be arbitrarily assigned. This book could easily be book 1 or book 2, and it would make no difference. So quantity does not belong to the beings being counted, but is a reflection of a transcendent nothing cast onto being by the for itself. Now, just as abstraction emerges out of consideration of quality, instrumentality emerges from a consideration of quantity. Sartre writes, "The original relation between things, that which appears on the foundation of the quantitative relation of the thises, is the relation of instrumentality." So while this book's permanence, arrived at through abstraction, entails a projection of my future possibilities, the book's instrumentality is revealed when I am indifferent to the book's being and instead behold it as a means to another end. For example, such as using the book as a doorstop, wherein I am concerned with whether the book has a sufficient weight and size to adequately stop the door from closing, rather than concerned with its inherent qualities of having words I can read, of being able to communicate ideas, etc., all those essential qualities that make a book a book. We can see this indifference of quantity reflected perfectly in, say, capitalism, wherein workers are reduced to a measure of profitability for those who employ them, their individuality being of no consequence in this circumstance. Of course, no exploration of categories would be complete without a consideration of time. Let's remember that temporality is an inherent feature of the for itself. The in itself is revealed as temporal because just as consciousness spatializes space, it temporalizes time, allowing things to appear as temporal. Being itself, however, has no intrinsic time. Yet there is an immediate awareness of things existing in time as encountered externally in the world. This perception of time as something external is what Sartre calls universal time. So like the externality of space, quantity, and instrumentality, time becomes something indifferent, and wherein it is seen as a linear series of infinitely dividable, undifferentiated moments. This experience of time is merely a tool for vision rather than an inherent property of the for itself or the in itself. It is another transcendent nothing. Our experience of things has both a temporal and atemporal aspect. When I move a book from one place to another, it remains the same book, permanence. But it was previously in a different location, change. So even though we perceive things in terms of time, the book itself doesn't have a concept of time. Rather, it moves through time as something external to the book. This is still the case even though things can also be apprehended in terms of their abolitions and apparitions, according to Sartre. Abolitions and apparitions here concerns the way things come in and out of consciousness, how those comings and goings only matter to consciousness and not to the in itself. They concern an external negation brought about by a for self who is responsible for these beginnings and endings or apparitions and abolitions of things. The in itself in contrast, is an unbounded plenitude that on its own lacks these kind of clear and distinct boundaries from one state to another or from one object to another. And these decisions of beginnings and ends that the for itself are responsible for is also considered external to the for itself, as it is merely the partitioning off of one being or state of being from another, and not a negation of oneself. So these apparitions and abolitions are neither the for itself, its own being is not in question, nor the in itself, which has no knowledge of its own beginnings and endings, but are the product of the atemporality of the in itself and the intrinsic temporality of the for itself, coming together, giving rise to a universal temporality, an external time. And Sartre notes that this universal temporality is specifically connected to the for itself's relation to the past, since it is one's past wherein the for itself becomes the in itself, and thus wherein we become capable of relating to time as something external and objective. While universal time is derived from the for itself's ecstatic relation to its past, the present is where universal time is fully realized, and this realization takes place through motion. The for itself makes its presence known to itself through that which moves. It is its own present in simultaneity with actual motion. It is motion which will be charged with realizing universal time insofar as the for itself makes known to itself its own present through the present of the moving body. In other words, I make myself present to these reading glasses. In doing so, the reading glasses are revealed to me through its differentiations from the totality of the world. My own awareness of my presence to these glasses occurs as I apprehend their changing position in space relative to me and other objects. So what then is motion? Motion entails an alteration in place or position of a this that itself remains unaltered. The change in motion could not affect the being of the object because it's the apprehension of an object's permanence amidst its changing positions that allows me to apprehend motion across fluctuating states of being and not being here or there. The for itself, through its ecstatic projection towards these objects, combines these fluctuations in gathering the for itself's past and present, creating a sense of continuity. But this motion is not the same as becoming that we talked about previously, since there is no change or actualization of the essential qualities of the object. It is purely an external difference and thus another transcendent nothing. The final part of this chapter discusses the concept of knowledge and its relationship to being and provides some concluding remarks based on the preceding analyses. It's helpful to remember that Sartre aims to avoid the pitfalls of both realism and idealism. Knowledge does not solely concern the properties of being in the external world, nor can knowledge be reduced to the operations of the mind as structures reality. Instead, knowledge is the presence of the for itself to the in itself, constituted by an internal negation. In this sense, knowledge is not something that succeeds or comes after the for itself's existence. Knowledge is an absolute event of the for itself coming into existence, which comes to be only by negating what it is not. In doing so, the for itself affirms the in itself, which gives rise to an in itself that, in a certain sense, is modified. This modification is not something positive added or altered to the in itself, but rather concerns the transcendent nothingnesses, if I can use that word, that modifies how the in itself is revealed to us. There is being because I am the negation of being, and worldliness, spatiality, quantity, instrumentality, temporality, all come into being only because I am the negation of being. These add nothing to being, but are the pure nihilated conditions of the there is. They only cause the there is to be realized. If you got something from this video and want to support this work, you can do so by liking and sharing this video, subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, or through a financial contribution through the Super Thanks button that's below. And if you want to be an ongoing supporter, you can do so on Patreon, where I offer video transcripts, unedited materials, and prioritize questions and comments here on YouTube. The link is below. I'd like to thank the following for already supporting this work on Patreon. I appreciate you making it all the way to the end. Thank you for watching. And until next time, be well.